The quiet shores of Tampa Bay, Florida, were known for their peaceful sunsets and gentle waves. But on the morning of March 17, 2003, the tranquil coastline became the setting for a mystery that would span continents and unravel a criminal network hidden in plain sight. Ray Whitman, a 58-year-old local fisherman, had been combing the shoreline near Honeymoon Island State Park as part of his morning routine. For years, Ray had walked these beaches at dawn, searching for interesting shells, driftwood, and occasionally valuable items washed ashore after storms. The previous night had brought unusually high tides, and Ray knew from experience that the morning after such weather events often yielded interesting discoveries. As the early morning sun cast long shadows across the sand, Ray noticed something unusual partially buried in a tangle of seaweed about 20 yards from the waterline. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a waterlogged wooden box, roughly 2 feet long and a foot wide, the kind that might contain expensive spirits or cigars. But as Ray approached and cleared away the debris, he noticed unusual markings on the side of the container, symbols that didn't resemble any commercial branding he recognized. Curious, Ray carefully pried open the weathered brass latch. What he found inside would set in motion an investigation that had gone cold 2 years earlier, thousands of miles away. Nestled inside the box, preserved in a sealed plastic bag, was a folded black fabric garment. It was unmistakably a nun's habit, the distinctive head covering worn by Catholic sisters. Alongside it were several water-damaged papers, including a passport and a small notebook with faded writing. Ray immediately contacted local authorities. Within hours, Detective Marcus Reynolds of the Tampa Police Department arrived at the scene, bringing with him forensic technicians who carefully documented and collected the mysterious package and its contents. Initial examination of the partially legible documents revealed a name: Sister Evelyn Parrish, an American nun who had apparently been in Greece. The documents were severely damaged by salt water, Reynolds would later explain, but our forensics team was able to recover enough information to determine that these belonged to a Sister Evelyn Parrish, who, according to her passport, had traveled to Crete, Greece, in early 2001. A preliminary search through law enforcement databases quickly linked the name to an open case. Sister Evelyn had been reported missing in October 2001 while on assignment in Crete. The Greek authorities had conducted an extensive search at the time, but found no trace of the American nun. The case had gradually faded from international attention, becoming one of many unsolved disappearances in foreign countries. The discovery in Florida, nearly 6,000 miles from where Sister Evelyn was last seen, raised alarming questions. How had her personal effects traveled across an ocean? And why had they surfaced now, almost 2 years after her disappearance? Within 48 hours of the discovery, the Federal Bureau of Investigation became involved. The case was assigned to Special Agent Brooke Harlow, a 15-year veteran of the Bureau's International Operations Division. Harlow had built her reputation recovering stolen artifacts and investigating crimes against American citizens abroad. With her background in art history and fluency in Greek, she was uniquely qualified to pick up the threads of this cold case. When personal effects of a missing person suddenly appear halfway around the world from their last known location, it typically indicates one of two things, Harlow noted in her initial case assessment. Either someone deliberately transported these items across international borders, or we're dealing with an extraordinary coincidence of ocean currents. Neither scenario bodes well for finding Sister Evelyn alive. Harlow's first task was to reconstruct Sister Evelyn's identity and movements. The profile that emerged was not that of a typical nun. Evelyn Parrish, born in 1959 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, had earned a master's degree in art conservation from New York University before joining the Sisters of Divine Preservation at age 32. Unlike most who took religious vows, Sister Evelyn had come to her calling after establishing a successful career. She had specialized in the restoration of religious artwork, particularly Byzantine icons and early Christian artifacts. Her expertise had made her valuable to the Pierce Foundation for Religious Conservation, a non-profit organization dedicated to preserving sacred art and artifacts worldwide. It was through this foundation that Sister Evelyn had been sent to Crete in 2001, assigned to a restoration project at the remote Orthodox monastery of Agios Nikolaos in the mountainous interior of the island. Sister Evelyn wasn't just any nun, explained Dr. Lillian Montague, director of the Pierce Foundation. She was one of our most skilled conservators, with a particular expertise in identifying forgeries and detecting alterations in ancient religious icons. Her technical skills were matched by her dedication to preserving religious heritage. As Agent Harlow delved deeper into the case files, she discovered something the initial investigation had overlooked. In the weeks before her disappearance, Sister Evelyn had sent several emails to the Foundation headquarters mentioning concerns about certain artifacts she had encountered during her work at the monastery. In her last communication, dated October 3, 2001, she had written cryptically about inconsistencies that suggest a more complex provenance than previously documented in several of the monastery's most valuable icons. The Greek police investigation, led by local authorities in Heraklion, had focused primarily on the possibility of an accident. The monastery was located near treacherous mountain paths with steep drops, and they theorized that Sister Evelyn might have fallen during a solitary walk. Despite extensive searches of the surrounding terrain, no body had ever been found. The discovery of her habit in Florida fundamentally changed the nature of the investigation. This was no longer a case of a possible accident or a nun who had chosen to abandon her vocation. Something more sinister was at play. Agent Harlow's review of the original case files revealed another crucial detail that had received insufficient attention. 10 days before her disappearance, Sister Evelyn had placed a call to her brother, Tanner Parrish, a professor of classical studies at Boston College. According to Tanner's statement to authorities, his sister had mentioned a tense interaction with a local art collector named Nikolaos Stavros, who had visited the monastery several times during her stay. She said this Stavros character seemed overly interested in her work and asked a lot of questions about the authentication process, Tanner had reported. Evelyn felt he was trying to gauge her expertise, almost testing her. She found it unsettling but didn't feel she was in any danger. The name Nikolaos Stavros had appeared in the initial investigation, but the Greek authorities had apparently accepted his statement without much scrutiny. Stavros, a wealthy businessman with political connections in Heraklion, had admitted to meeting Sister Evelyn but denied any involvement in her disappearance. He had provided an alibi, claiming to have been hosting a dinner party at his estate on the night she vanished. Armed with this new evidence, the mysterious appearance of Sister Evelyn's habit in Florida, Agent Harlow prepared to reopen the investigation from both ends. She would need to trace the path of the wooden box from Greece to Florida, while simultaneously revisiting the circumstances of Sister Evelyn's disappearance on Crete. As forensic analysts in the FBI laboratory examined the habit and the wooden box for additional clues, Harlow began making arrangements to travel to Greece. The case that had gone cold was now very much alive, and the appearance of Sister Evelyn's belongings, so far from her last known location, suggested a disturbing possibility. What had once been classified as a disappearance might actually have been something far more calculated. Before departing for Greece, Harlow arranged a meeting with Ray Whitman, the fisherman who had made the discovery. His description of the tides and currents on the day he found the box provided a crucial piece of information. Marine experts consulted by the FBI confirmed that it was virtually impossible for an object to drift naturally from the Mediterranean to the Florida coast. The box had been transported deliberately, but by whom? And why had it suddenly surfaced now? As Agent Harlow boarded her flight to Athens, she carried with her photographs of Sister Evelyn Parrish and Nikolaos Stavros. The habit that had washed up on a Florida beach had set in motion an investigation that would uncover a web of deception, greed, and ultimately murder, stretching across oceans and involving individuals from the highest echelons of the art world to the darkest corners of international smuggling. The truth about what happened to Sister Evelyn Parrish in the remote mountains of Crete was about to emerge, beginning with a journey to the last place she was seen alive, and to a confrontation with those who had thought her story would remain buried forever. Athens International Airport bustled with the usual chaos of travelers when Agent Brooke Harlow arrived on a warm April morning in 2003. The journey from Tampa to Greece had given her time to review Sister Evelyn's case files thoroughly, but Harlow knew that understanding the full context of the nun's work would be crucial to unraveling the mystery of her disappearance. Her first stop was the American Embassy in Athens, where she met with Diplomatic Security Service agent Neil Lockhart, who had served as the primary liaison with Greek authorities during the initial investigation in 2001. The Greeks were thorough in their search efforts, Lockhart explained as they reviewed the case in a secure conference room. But they approached it as an accident or possible voluntary disappearance. The monastery is perched on a cliff edge with dangerous hiking paths nearby. Their theory was that Sister Evelyn might have fallen, with her body possibly never recoverable from the ravine below. And yet her habit somehow made it to Florida, Harlow countered. That changes everything. Lockhart nodded grimly. I always thought there was more to this case. Sister Evelyn wasn't some tourist who wandered off. She was experienced, careful, and had a specific purpose for being here. Before heading to Crete, Harlow made an important stop at the Athens office of the Pierce Foundation for Religious Conservation. The foundation's Mediterranean director, Dr. Eleanor Winthrop, had worked closely with Sister Evelyn before her disappearance. Evelyn wasn't just a skilled conservator, she was a detective in her own right, Dr. Winthrop explained, spreading photographs of restoration projects across her desk. She could spot inconsistencies in religious artwork that others missed entirely. It's why we sent her to the monastery of Agios Nikolaos in the first place. What was special about that assignment? Harlow asked, studying the images of ancient icons with their solemn faces and gold leaf backgrounds. The monastery claimed to have discovered a previously unknown collection of 12th century Byzantine icons during renovation work. If authentic, they would be extraordinarily valuable both historically and monetarily. Evelyn was sent to authenticate and help restore them. Dr. Winthrop pulled out a folder containing emails exchanged between herself and Sister Evelyn. These were her last communications with the Foundation. Read them carefully. You'll notice how her tone changes over time. The emails revealed a troubling progression. Initially, Sister Evelyn had been enthusiastic about the project, describing the icons as breathtaking examples of the Komnenian period. But 3 weeks into her work, her messages began to reflect growing concerns. One email particularly stood out, sent just a week before her disappearance. I've identified anomalies in the pigmentation and gilding techniques that raise serious questions about the provenance of at least 3 icons in the collection. While they appear ancient at first glance, microscopic analysis reveals materials inconsistent with 12th century methods. I need to expand my investigation before reaching definitive conclusions, but if my suspicions are correct, someone has gone to extraordinary lengths to create convincing forgeries. I've also found a curious symbol hidden in the corner of 2 icons, possibly a modern artist's signature, disguised as decorative element. In her final email to the Foundation, Sister Evelyn had mentioned meeting Nikolaos Stavros, describing him as unusually interested in my authentication methods and visibly unsettled when I mentioned my plans to take samples for laboratory analysis. Did she ever send those samples for testing? Harlow asked. No, Dr. Winthrop replied. They were never received. After she disappeared, the monastery claimed no knowledge of any samples she had collected. Armed with this information, Harlow traveled to Heraklion, Crete's capital city, where she met with Detective Markos Petridis, who had led the original investigation. Unlike many local officials who might resent FBI involvement, Petridis welcomed Harlow's assistance. I never believed it was an accident, he confided as they drove through the narrow streets of Heraklion. But without evidence of foul play and with powerful interests involved, my investigation was constrained. Powerful interests? Harlow inquired. Nikolaos Stavros is not just a wealthy collector. His family has deep political connections throughout Greece. When we questioned him, there was immediate pressure from above to handle him with exceptional care. Petridis had maintained his own unofficial file on the case, which he shared with Harlow. It contained information that hadn't made it into the official reports, including observations about Stavros's behavior during questioning and inconsistencies in statements from monastery officials. The alibi Stavros provided was a dinner party at his villa, with 12 guests, all prominent citizens, Petridis explained. All confirmed his presence throughout the evening when Sister Evelyn disappeared. But look here, he pointed to a note in his personal records. One guest, Alexis Dimitriou, left me a private message 2 days after our interview. Before I could meet him again, he suddenly departed for Australia on family business and has never returned to Greece. This was the first real crack in Stavros's alibi, a potentially crucial lead that the original investigation hadn't pursued. The following day, Harlow and Petridis made the journey to the monastery of Agios Nikolaos, a 3-hour drive through the mountainous interior of Crete. The monastery stood like a fortress on a cliff edge, its stone walls seeming to grow naturally from the rocky promontory. With its commanding view of the valley below, it had survived centuries of invasions and political upheavals. The monastery's abbot, Father Gregorios, received them with obvious reluctance. A stern man in his 70s with a long grey beard and penetrating eyes, he answered their questions with minimal elaboration. "Sister Evelyn was a guest here for nearly a month," he stated flatly. "She worked diligently on the restoration project. On the day she disappeared, she told Brother Thaddeus she was going for an evening walk to clear her mind. She never returned." When Harlow asked to see Sister Evelyn's working space and the icons she had been examining, Father Gregorios became noticeably tenser. "I'm afraid that's not possible. The icons are sacred objects, not evidence in your investigation. They've been returned to their proper place in our sanctuary, which is not accessible to women, even female investigators. As for her workspace, it has since been repurposed. There would be nothing to see." Despite the abbot's resistance, Harlow insisted on seeing Sister Evelyn's living quarters. The small cell-like room had indeed been cleared of her belongings, which had supposedly been sent back to her order in the United States. Yet when Harlow examined the room thoroughly, she discovered something overlooked: a small notebook hidden in a gap between the stone wall and the wooden bed frame. It contained Sister Evelyn's handwritten notes about her examination of the icons, including detailed sketches of the suspicious markings she had found. More importantly, the notebook contained a hastily written entry dated the day before her disappearance. "S came again today with another man. Tall American accent, called himself Beck. They didn't realize I understand Greek. They spoke when they thought I couldn't hear, mentioned shipment dates and Tampa contact. Something is very wrong here. We'll contact Foundation tomorrow with full details." This was the breakthrough Harlow needed. Concrete evidence linking Sister Evelyn's concerns about the icons to someone with a connection to Tampa, Florida, where her habit had mysteriously appeared 18 months later. When confronted with this evidence, Father Gregorios maintained his ignorance, but reluctantly admitted that Stavros had visited the monastery multiple times during Sister Evelyn's stay, often bringing associates with him. "He is a benefactor of our monastery," the abbot explained. "His interest in our religious treasures is purely devotional." Leaving the monastery, Harlow and Petridis made a crucial stop at the small village of Axos, located at the foot of the mountain. There they found Brother Thaddeus, who had left the monastery 6 months after Sister Evelyn's disappearance. Unlike the abbot, Brother Thaddeus was willing to speak freely. "Sister Evelyn was troubled in her final days at the monastery," he revealed. "She confided in me that she believed several of the icons were sophisticated modern forgeries, crafted specifically to be discovered at the monastery. When she began collecting evidence, strange men started appearing, not just Stavros but others, foreigners. Most significantly, Brother Thaddeus revealed that he had witnessed something the night of Sister Evelyn's disappearance that he had been afraid to report previously. I saw her being escorted to a black SUV by 2 men. She wasn't struggling, but she seemed distressed. I assumed they were taking her to Heraklion for some urgent matter related to her work. When she didn't return and the abbot said she had gone for a walk, I knew something was wrong, but I feared speaking out against Stavros and his associates." This testimony directly contradicted the monastery's official story and confirmed Harlow's suspicion that Sister Evelyn's disappearance was connected to her discoveries about the icons. Back in Heraklion, Harlow's investigation took a new direction. She began researching the art market for Byzantine religious artifacts, discovering that prices had skyrocketed in the late 1990s as wealthy collectors, particularly from Russia and the United States, developed an interest in Orthodox Christian art. A pattern emerged. Over the previous 5 years, several newly discovered collections of Byzantine icons had appeared on the market, many with provenance documents linking them to monasteries in Greece, Turkey, and the Balkans. Experts had occasionally raised questions about authenticity, but the religious institution's verification was generally accepted without rigorous independent authentication. "It's the perfect scheme," Harlow explained to Petridis. "Create convincing forgeries, discover them during renovation work at actual historical monasteries, establish provenance through religious authorities who might be either complicit or simply lacking expertise, then sell to eager collectors at astronomical prices." With this framework established, Harlow focused on the American connection mentioned in Sister Evelyn's notebook. The name Beck, with an American accent, and the reference to a Tampa contact provided crucial leads. Working with the FBI field office in Tampa, she identified a potential suspect, Beck Donovan, captain of the cargo vessel Poseidon's Trident, which made regular runs between Piraeus, Greece, and Tampa, Florida. Donovan's shipping manifests showed that his vessel had been docked in Piraeus on the day after Sister Evelyn's disappearance. More significantly, the manifests listed a shipment of religious artifacts consigned by a company called Hellenic Heritage Exports, which Harlow discovered was a shell corporation owned by Nikolaos Stavros. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of the wooden box found in Florida yielded another crucial piece of evidence. Microscopic examination revealed a partial fingerprint on the inner lid that matched Stavros's prints on file from his previous visits to the United States. The box itself was identified as a specialized container used for transporting fragile artifacts, lined with materials designed to regulate humidity and protect contents from saltwater damage. As Harlow prepared to return to the United States to pursue the American end of the investigation, she received an unexpected call from Dr. Winthrop at the Pierce Foundation. A former colleague of Sister Evelyn had come forward with information that would prove pivotal to the case. Dr. Miranda Chen, an art historian who had worked with Sister Evelyn on previous projects, revealed that shortly before leaving for Crete, Sister Evelyn had shared concerns about a growing black market in forged Byzantine artifacts. More importantly, she had mentioned developing a new chemical test that could definitively identify modern forgeries by detecting synthetic compounds in the aging agents used to make new icons look centuries old. She was excited about the test, Dr. Chen explained. She believed it could expose a major forgery operation that had infiltrated legitimate religious institutions. She planned to collect samples in Crete to prove her theory. This revelation provided the missing motive. If Sister Evelyn had indeed developed a method to expose sophisticated forgeries, she would have posed a significant threat to whoever was behind the operation. Her expertise and her integrity had made her dangerous to those profiting from the scheme. As Agent Harlow boarded her flight back to the United States, she was convinced that Sister Evelyn Parrish had been silenced because of what she discovered at the monastery of Agios Nikolaos. The appearance of her habit in Florida was no longer mysterious but part of a clear connection between her disappearance and an international network trafficking in forged religious artifacts. The investigation was now shifting to American soil, where Harlow would need to identify the U.S. end of this operation and determine exactly how Sister Evelyn's personal effects had made their journey across the ocean, a journey that would ultimately expose those responsible for her fate. The Florida humidity hit Agent Harlow like a wall as she exited Tampa International Airport in late April 2003. After 2 weeks in Greece, she had assembled enough evidence to confirm that Sister Evelyn Parrish's disappearance was no accident or voluntary vanishing. The investigation had transformed from a missing person case into something far more complex, a potential homicide connected to an international art forgery and smuggling operation. "We've been tracking Beck Donovan's movements since you identified him," said Special Agent Trevor Riggs, Harlow's FBI colleague from the Tampa field office, as they drove toward downtown. "The Poseidon's Trident made 7 trips between Greece and Florida in the 18 months between Sister Evelyn's disappearance and the discovery of her habit. Donovan is currently at sea, due back in port in 3 days." "And what about our Tampa connection?" Harlow asked, reviewing the file Riggs had prepared. "That's where things get interesting. We've identified a potential suspect named Vaughn Mercer. He's an antiquities dealer specializing in religious artifacts, operating a gallery in Ybor City. Mercer's name appears on several customs declarations for shipments received from Hellenic Heritage Exports, Stavros's shell company." Riggs parked outside a nondescript government building where the FBI had established a temporary command center for the investigation. Inside, a team of analysts had assembled financial records, shipping manifests, and surveillance reports connected to the case. "Financial Intelligence Unit found something significant," Riggs explained, directing Harlow to a computer display showing a complex web of transactions. In the 2 weeks following Sister Evelyn's disappearance, a series of wire transfers totaling $350,000 moved from an offshore account linked to Stavros to a Cayman Islands corporation. From there, the money was dispersed to several entities, including $75,000 to a holding company called Antiquity Partners LLC, registered to Vaughn Mercer. "Payment for services rendered," Harlow murmured, studying the transaction dates. The next morning, Harlow and Riggs conducted surveillance on Mercer's gallery, an elegant storefront in Tampa's historic district featuring Byzantine and Orthodox religious art. Through the windows, They could see ornate icons, gilt-framed and illuminated by strategic lighting, displayed like sacred objects in a museum. A discreet sign indicated that items were available for the discerning private collector by appointment only. His client list includes some of the wealthiest collectors in the southeastern United States, Riggs noted. On paper, everything looks legitimate. He has import licenses, pays his taxes, contributes to cultural preservation organizations. He even lectures at the university on religious iconography. The perfect cover, Harlow replied. Let's see what's behind the respectable facade. Rather than confronting Mercer directly, Harlow decided to approach from an unexpected angle. The forensics team had discovered microscopic fibers embedded in the wooden box that contained Sister Evelyn's habit, fibers consistent with specialized packing materials used for transporting fragile artwork. These materials were available from only a handful of suppliers that catered to museums and high-end art dealers. One such supplier, Maritime Conservation Supplies, was located in Tampa. Their records confirmed that Vaughn Mercer was a regular customer, purchasing specialized containers nearly identical to the one found on the beach. More importantly, Beck Donovan had also made purchases from the same company, using a corporate credit card issued by his shipping line. We need to look at Donovan's cargo manifests more carefully, Harlow instructed the team. Not just what was declared, but any discrepancies in weight, volume, or container counts. A customs analyst named Saria Patel joined the investigation, bringing expertise in identifying shipping irregularities. Captain Donovan's manifests show some interesting patterns, she explained. On every voyage returning from Greece, his vessel carried at least one container designated for fragile religious artifacts, consigned to Mercer's gallery. But there's something odd. The weight distributions don't match the declared contents. There's approximately 200 pounds of unaccounted for weight on each shipment. This discrepancy suggested the containers were carrying undeclared items alongside the legitimate cargo, but what those items might be and how they connected to Sister Evelyn remained unclear. As the team prepared for Donovan's return to port, Harlow focused on another lead from the monastery investigation. Sister Evelyn's notebook had mentioned chemical testing of pigments, tests that might have exposed the forgery operation. If she had documented her findings, that evidence could be crucial. Harlow arranged a video conference with Dr. Miranda Chen, Sister Evelyn's former colleague who had mentioned the nun's new testing method. Evelyn was brilliant at materials analysis, Dr. Chen explained from her laboratory at the University of Michigan. She had developed a process using gas chromatography to identify synthetic compounds in the aging agents used by forgers. Traditional methods can make new icons look centuries old, but they use natural materials that are chemically distinct from modern synthetic agents. Would she have had the equipment to conduct these tests in Crete? Harlow asked. No, she would have collected samples to analyze later. She always carried a specialized kit for this purpose. Microscopic scrapings that wouldn't damage the artifacts, but would provide enough material for testing. This information provided another potential motive. If Sister Evelyn had collected samples that could expose the forgeries, those samples would have been extremely dangerous to the operation and to Stavros's reputation and freedom. The investigation took a significant turn when the Poseidon's Trident docked in Tampa Bay 3 days later. Under the pretext of a routine customs inspection, federal agents boarded the vessel and conducted a thorough search while Captain Beck Donovan was detained for questioning. Donovan, a weathered man in his 50s with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command, initially maintained his innocence, claiming no knowledge of anything illegal in his cargo. "I transport what's in the containers," he insisted during Harlow's initial questioning. "The contents are sealed and certified by customs officials in Greece. I don't inspect what's inside. And yet you purchased specialized packing materials from Maritime Conservation Supplies," Harlow countered. "Materials identical to those used in the box that washed up on a Florida beach containing Sister Evelyn Parrish's habit." Donovan's composure faltered briefly, but he quickly recovered. "I occasionally transport sensitive items for clients who request additional protection. That's perfectly legal." While the interrogation continued, the search team made a critical discovery. Hidden in Donovan's private quarters was a false panel concealing a small safe. Inside were several items: $45,000 in cash, a satellite phone not registered with the shipping company, and most significantly, a small notebook containing coded entries correlating with his voyages between Greece and Florida. When confronted with this evidence, Donovan continued to deny involvement in anything illegal. However, the search of his vessel yielded another crucial find. In the cargo hold, investigators discovered a hidden compartment built into the bulkhead, accessible only through a sophisticated mechanism disguised as routine ship equipment. The space was empty, but forensic technicians found traces of various substances, including microscopic particles of the same pigments used in Byzantine icon painting. As this evidence mounted, Harlow received word from the team in Greece. Detective Petridis had continued investigating the monastery and had finally found someone willing to break the wall of silence. A young novice monk named Brother Elias, who had been absent during Harlow's visit, contacted Petridis with crucial information. Brother Elias witnessed Sister Evelyn's abduction, Petridis reported via secure video call. He was returning to the monastery after dark when he saw her being forced into a vehicle by two men. He recognized one as an associate of Stavros, who had visited the monastery previously. He was too frightened to come forward at the time, but your investigation has given him courage. This eyewitness account directly contradicted the monastery's claim that Sister Evelyn had gone for a walk and never returned. It confirmed that she had been forcibly removed from the monastery, the first step in what was looking increasingly like a carefully orchestrated crime. With this new information, Harlow intensified the pressure on Beck Donovan. After 12 hours of interrogation and faced with mounting evidence, including phone records showing calls to Stavros and Mercer on key dates, Donovan's resolve finally cracked. "I never touched her," he insisted, his earlier confidence now replaced with visible fear. "I was just the transportation. Stavros and Mercer handled everything else. I didn't know they were going to kill her until it was too late." Donovan's partial confession opened the floodgates. In exchange for considerations in charging, he provided details about the operation that had been running for nearly 5 years. Stavros employed master forgers to create convincing Byzantine icons, which were then discovered during sponsored renovation work at financially struggling monasteries. The religious authorities either were deceived about the artifact's authenticity or were complicit in exchange for substantial donations. "Sister Evelyn was too good," Donovan explained. "She spotted inconsistencies nobody else had noticed. Stavros was worried at first, but he thought he could handle her, charm her, mislead her, whatever it took. Then he found out she was collecting samples for testing. That's when everything changed." According to Donovan, Stavros had ordered Sister Evelyn to be brought to his villa for questioning about her findings. The plan was to intimidate her into silence, possibly by threatening the monastery's funding or her future work in Greece. But something went wrong. "I wasn't there," Donovan insisted. "I was preparing the ship for departure. All I know is that Mercer called me in a panic, saying there had been an accident and they needed to dispose of evidence immediately. They brought her personal effects to the ship that night, her habit, passport, some papers. I was told to get rid of them at sea once we were in international waters." "But you didn't," Harlow observed. Donovan looked away. "I put everything in a waterproof container and stored it in the hidden compartment. I don't know why, insurance maybe. Leverage if Stavros ever turned on me. But I kept it voyage after voyage. Then, during a storm last February, there was damage to that section of the hold. Water got in. The box must have washed out without anyone noticing." This account explained how Sister Evelyn's habit had made its way to Florida, but critical questions remained unanswered. What exactly had happened to Sister Evelyn at Stavros's villa, and where was her body? With Donovan's testimony, federal prosecutors had enough evidence to charge him with conspiracy and accessory after the fact. More importantly, they now had sufficient grounds to request Nikolaos Stavros' extradition from Greece and to obtain search warrants for Vaughan Mercer's gallery, home and financial records. The search of Mercer's properties proved to be the tipping point in the investigation. Behind a false wall in his gallery's storage room, agents discovered a hidden workshop containing materials for aging and distressing new artwork to appear centuries old. More damning still were detailed ledgers documenting the forgery operation, including payments to artists, bribes to officials, and profit distributions. But the most significant find came from a safe in Mercer's home office, a small case containing what appeared to be scientific samples, tiny scrapings of paint and gilding mounted on labeled slides. Forensic analysis would later confirm these were Sister Evelyn's missing test samples, stolen after her murder. As federal agents moved to arrest Mercer at his home in an exclusive Tampa neighborhood, they made one final discovery. In a panic when he realized investigators were closing in, Mercer had attempted to destroy evidence by burning documents in his backyard fire pit. Among the partially burned papers recovered by evidence technicians was a handwritten account of what had happened at Stavros's villa the night Sister Evelyn disappeared, an account that would finally reveal the full truth about her fate. With these crucial pieces of evidence secured, and Donovan cooperating with prosecutors, Agent Harlow prepared to return to Greece with an international arrest warrant for Nikolaos Stavros. The case that had begun with a mysterious discovery on a Florida beach was coming full circle, back to the Mediterranean island where a dedicated nun had uncovered a criminal enterprise and paid the ultimate price for her integrity. The next phase would require coordinated operations on 2 continents to bring all those responsible to justice and to finally uncover the complete truth about what happened to Sister Evelyn Parrish after she discovered that the sacred icons she had been sent to authenticate were elaborate forgeries designed to deceive both the faithful and the art world. The late spring heat in Athens seemed oppressive as Agent Harlow returned to Greece, this time accompanied by a legal attaché from the US Department of Justice. Their mission had clear diplomatic implications. They were seeking the arrest and extradition of Nikolaos Stavros, a man with powerful political connections and a public reputation as a cultural philanthropist. "This won't be simple," cautioned US Embassy legal attaché Diana Fernandez as they prepared for a meeting with Greek prosecutors. "Stavros has friends in the current government. They'll demand ironclad evidence before moving against him." Fortunately, the evidence had grown substantially since Harlow's first visit. Beck Donovan's testimony had provided a crucial framework, and the materials recovered from Mercer's properties in Tampa had filled in many gaps. Post-damning were the financial records showing millions of dollars flowing between Stavros, Mercer, and various shell companies following sales of forged artifacts to museums and private collectors worldwide. Detective Markos Petridis met them at the prosecutor's office, bringing additional evidence gathered from his continued investigation. "We've finally broken through the silence at the monastery," he explained. "After Brother Elias came forward, others followed. 3 monks have now confirmed that Stavros visited frequently during Sister Evelyn's stay, often bringing associates to view her work. They've also admitted that Father Gregorios received substantial donations after each successful authentication of supposedly discovered artifacts." The Greek prosecutor, a stern woman named Eleni Papadakis, reviewed the combined evidence with methodical precision. "This is sufficient for search warrants," she finally announced. "But for arrest and extradition, we need direct evidence linking Stavros to Sister Evelyn's disappearance and presumed death." That evidence existed in the partially burned documents recovered from Mercer's fire pit. Forensic reconstruction had revealed a chilling account, apparently written by Mercer himself as a form of insurance against Stavros. It described how Sister Evelyn had been brought to Stavros's villa for what was intended to be intimidation and bribery. She refused to cooperate, Mercer had written. When Stavros offered her money to certify the icons as authentic, she laughed in his face. She had already sent her preliminary findings to colleagues in America, she claimed. Then she threatened to expose not just this collection, but the entire operation to international authorities. According to the document, Stavros had become enraged and struck Sister Evelyn, who fell and hit her head on a marble table edge. Whether she died immediately or was killed afterward to silence her remained unclear from the damaged document, but the outcome was certain. Stavros and Mercer had disposed of her body and orchestrated the cover story about her taking a walk and vanishing. Based on this evidence, Prosecutor Papadakis authorized both search and arrest warrants. The operation to apprehend Stavros was planned with exceptional secrecy, given his connections and resources. At dawn on May 15, 2003, Greek police surrounded Stavros's cliffside villa near Heraklion. Simultaneously, additional teams executed search warrants at his offices in Athens, his warehouse in Piraeus, and a remote property he owned in the mountains of Crete. Stavros himself was arrested while still in bed, his initial shock quickly replaced by cold calculation as he demanded to speak with his attorney. The searches yielded a treasure trove of evidence. In a climate-controlled room beneath his villa, investigators discovered what appeared to be a private gallery containing numerous religious artifacts. Some authentic antiquities likely obtained illegally, others sophisticated forgeries waiting to be discovered and authenticated. Most significant was a hidden safe in Stavros's office containing Sister Evelyn's original passport, personal journal, and a USB drive with her preliminary findings about the forged icons. He had kept these items as trophies, a mistake that would prove fatal to his defense. As Stavros was being processed at police headquarters in Heraklion, an unexpected development occurred in Florida. Vaughn Mercer, facing multiple federal charges and the possibility of life imprisonment, offered a full confession in exchange for considerations in sentencing. His detailed testimony filled in the remaining gaps in the case. According to Mercer, the forgery operation had begun as a small-scale venture between himself and Stavros, whom he had met at an antiquities conference in London 5 years earlier. Both men had expertise in the art market, Stavros through his family's legitimate art-dealing business, Mercer through his academic background in Byzantine studies. It started with just one icon, Mercer confessed. Stavros had connections to a talented forger in Athens who could create convincing Byzantine pieces. We discovered it during renovation work at a small church, authenticated it through complicit experts, and sold it to a Russian collector for 10 times what it cost to produce. The success of this initial venture had led to an expanding operation. Stavros handled the production and discovery of forgeries in Greece, while Mercer managed their introduction to the American market through his gallery. Beck Donovan was recruited to transport the pieces, using his legitimate shipping business as cover. The operation grew to include a network of forgers, corrupt appraisers, and complicit religious officials. What had begun as a scheme to sell individual forgeries evolved into a sophisticated enterprise that created entire collections of supposedly lost Byzantine treasures, complete with fabricated provenance documentation. The monastery of Agios Nikolaos was our most ambitious project, Mercer explained. We needed a legitimate religious institution with historical significance to discover a major collection. Stavros cultivated Father Gregorios for over a year, providing donations for monastery repairs and restoration work. During this renovation, workers discovered a hidden chamber containing icons that had supposedly been sealed away during Ottoman rule to protect them from destruction. The collection was, in fact, entirely created by modern artists using historical techniques, but with subtle modern materials that would be undetectable except under sophisticated analysis. The plan was to have these icons authenticated, exhibited briefly at the monastery to establish their legitimacy, and then sold to museums and private collectors for tens of millions of dollars. Sister Evelyn Parish's arrival had threatened to unravel the entire scheme. Her expertise in conservation techniques included advanced methods for detecting forgeries that few other authenticators employed. We didn't plan to kill her, Mercer insisted in his confession. Stavros thought he could charm her, or if necessary, bribe her. She seemed so unworldly, so focused on preservation rather than monetary value. We underestimated her integrity. Mercer then provided the most damning details of what happened the night of Sister Evelyn's disappearance. After she identified inconsistencies in several icons, Stavros had her brought to his villa under the pretense of discussing her findings privately. When attempts to bribe her failed, the situation escalated. Stavros became enraged when she revealed she'd already collected samples for testing. He struck her in a fit of anger, and she fell against a marble table. There was so much blood. Mercer's account confirmed what the burned document had suggested. We panicked. Stavros called some men who worked for him, former military types who handled security for his shipping operations. They took care of the body. When pressed on what "took care of" meant, Mercer was explicit. They weighted it and dropped it into the sea from a boat, in a deep underwater ravine several miles offshore. It would be impossible to recover. With Mercer's confession and the evidence recovered from Stavros's properties, the case against the art dealer was overwhelming. Greek authorities charged him with murder, fraud, smuggling of cultural artifacts, and corruption of public officials. The United States filed additional charges related to money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Meanwhile, the investigation expanded to identify other participants in the scheme. Financial records from Stavros's and Mercer's offices led to the arrests of 3 forgers in Athens, 2 corrupt museum officials who had provided false authentications, and several middlemen who had facilitated sales to unwitting collectors. The scope of the forgery operation proved even larger than initially suspected. Investigators identified at least 67 forged Byzantine icons that had been sold through the network over 5 years, with a combined value exceeding $30 million. Museums and private collections worldwide were notified, triggering a crisis in the religious art market as institutions scrambled to verify the authenticity of their recent acquisitions. At the monastery of Agios Nikolaos, Father Gregorios was removed from his position by Orthodox Church authorities pending an ecclesiastical investigation into his role in the scheme. Several other monks who had provided false testimonies about Sister Evelyn's disappearance faced church disciplinary proceedings. As the case moved toward trial in Greece, one mystery remained unresolved. What had happened to Sister Evelyn's research samples and notes that might have definitively exposed the forgeries? Mercer claimed they had been destroyed immediately after her death, but Agent Harlow suspected otherwise. The answer came from an unexpected source. During a detailed search of Stavros's villa, investigators discovered a hidden room adjacent to his wine cellar. Inside was a sophisticated laboratory containing equipment for aging and distressing artwork. Among the materials was a small refrigerated cabinet containing biological samples, including the very samples Sister Evelyn had collected from the forged icons. Stavros had kept them, perhaps as a way to improve his forger's techniques by understanding exactly what had given away their work. This final piece of evidence not only strengthened the case against him, but allowed forensic experts to conclusively prove that the discovered icons were modern creations. In October 2003, 6 months after the discovery of Sister Evelyn's habit on a Florida beach, Nikolaos Stavros went on trial in Heraklion for murder and fraud. Despite hiring a team of prominent defense attorneys, the evidence against him was insurmountable. Beck Donovan testified against him in exchange for a reduced sentence, providing details about dozens of smuggling operations. Mercer's comprehensive confession left no room for Stavros to shift blame onto his co-conspirators. After a 6-week trial that garnered international attention, Stavros was convicted on all counts. The Greek court sentenced him to life imprisonment for the murder of Sister Evelyn Parish, with additional sentences for his other crimes. In the United States, Vaughn Mercer received a 25-year sentence for his role in the conspiracy and for being an accessory to murder. Beck Donovan, having cooperated extensively with authorities, was sentenced to 12 years for smuggling and conspiracy charges. The case had profound ripple effects through the art world. Museums implemented more rigorous authentication processes, particularly for religious artifacts with recent provenance. The Orthodox Church established a commission to identify potentially forged icons in monasteries throughout Greece, eventually uncovering several other fraudulent discoveries orchestrated by different criminal networks. For the Sisters of Divine Preservation, the resolution of Sister Evelyn's case brought a measure of closure. In a private ceremony at their Cambridge headquarters, they established the Sister Evelyn Parish Fund for Authentic Conservation, dedicated to training authenticators and providing technological resources to identify forgeries before they could enter the art market. Agent Brooke Harlow received commendations from both American and Greek authorities for her work on the case. During the final press conference in Washington, she reflected on the investigation's broader significance. This case wasn't just about art fraud or even a single murder, tragic as that was. It was about the corruption of history and faith for profit. Sister Evelyn Parish died because she was unwilling to compromise the truth, even when facing powerful people who thought their money and influence put them above the law. Her integrity ultimately brought down an entire criminal enterprise. 1 year after the discovery of the nun's habit on a Florida beach, a memorial was erected at the monastery of Agios Nikolaos, acknowledging Sister Evelyn's sacrifice and dedication to preserving authentic religious heritage. The plaque, placed near the spot where she had worked to expose the forgeries, bore a simple inscription that captured her legacy. Truth reveals itself to those with the courage to seek it. The wooden box that had traveled across an ocean, carrying evidence of a crime that might otherwise have remained hidden forever, was preserved in the FBI's archive of significant case artifacts, a reminder that even the most carefully concealed crimes can surface in unexpected ways, and that justice, though sometimes delayed, can still be served. By early 2004, what had begun as an investigation into a single disappearance had expanded into one of the largest art fraud cases in recent history. The trial and conviction of Nikolaos Stavros had made international headlines, but for Agent Brooke Harlow and the investigative team, significant questions remained. The scale of the operation suggested a network far more extensive than just Stavros, Mercer, and Donovan. "We've cut off the head, but the body is still moving," Harlow observed during a briefing at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. "The financial trails lead to connections in at least 7 countries, and we've identified several collectors who likely knew they were purchasing forgeries. With Stavros beginning his life sentence in a Greek prison and Mercer cooperating from federal custody in the United States, the investigation entered a new phase focused on mapping the full extent of the criminal enterprise. Specialized teams from the FBI's Art Crime Unit, Financial Crimes Section, and International Operations Division worked together to unravel the complex web of relationships and transactions. Financial analyst Maya Desai, who had been assigned to trace the money flowing through the operation, presented her findings to the expanded task force. "We've identified approximately $47 million in transactions related to this network over the past 7 years," she explained, displaying a complex diagram of interconnected entities. The money moved through at least 32 shell companies in 12 jurisdictions, primarily in the Caribbean, Cyprus, and Liechtenstein. What emerged from this financial analysis was evidence of a much larger criminal ecosystem. The forgery operation had connections to other forms of art crime, including the trafficking of genuine antiquities looted from archaeological sites and museums in conflict zones across the Middle East and North Africa. Stavros and Mercer weren't just selling forgeries, Harlow realized. They were using the same infrastructure to move authentic stolen artifacts. The forgery operation may have been a sideline to their main business in black market antiquities. This theory gained support when investigators searched a warehouse in New Jersey registered to one of Mercer's shell companies. Hidden behind false walls, they discovered dozens of artifacts that experts identified as having been looted from museums in Iraq following the 2003 invasion. These pieces had been destined for sale to collectors who were willing to purchase items without clear provenance, the same network that had purchased many of the forged Byzantine icons. The investigation soon focused on one particular collector, Harrison Beaumont, a hedge fund billionaire with homes in New York, London, and Monaco. Financial records showed that Beaumont had purchased over $15 million in artifacts from Mercer's gallery over a 5-year period, including several now identified forgeries. More troubling, phone records recovered from Mercer's devices revealed multiple calls between Mercer and Beaumont in the days immediately following Sister Evelyn's disappearance. When federal agents executed a search warrant at Beaumont's Manhattan penthouse, they discovered a private collection that museum experts described as astonishing in both its quality and its dubious provenance. Among the artifacts were pieces recently looted from Syrian archaeological sites, Egyptian antiquities that had disappeared from a Baghdad museum, and several Byzantine icons from the same forged collection Sister Evelyn had been examining. Under intense questioning and faced with potential charges of receiving stolen property and tax fraud for misrepresenting the value of his collection, Beaumont began to cooperate. His testimony opened a window into the world of ultra-wealthy collectors who operated with little regard for legal or ethical boundaries. "Mercer approached me about 5 years ago," Beaumont explained during a proffer session with prosecutors. "He said he had access to pieces that would never appear on the open market. He made it clear that discretion was essential and that the provenance documentation might not withstand close scrutiny. The arrangement was simple. I would get museum-quality pieces at below-market prices, no questions asked." According to Beaumont, this relationship had evolved over time. Eventually, Mercer had approached him about investing in what was described as an artifact development venture, a euphemism for the forgery operation. "I provided $3 million in initial funding," Beaumont admitted. Stavros had connections to artists in Athens who could create convincing Byzantine-style icons, and Mercer had the expertise to age them properly and create false provenance. My role was simply as a silent investor and occasional buyer. Most significantly, Beaumont confirmed that he had been aware of Sister Evelyn's accident shortly after it occurred. "Mercer called me in a panic the next morning. He said there had been a problem with an authenticator at the monastery, and that Stavros had handled it permanently. He was worried about exposure and wanted to accelerate our timeline for moving certain pieces before any investigation could begin." This testimony directly implicated Beaumont as an accessory after the fact in Sister Evelyn's murder. More importantly, for the broader investigation, it provided evidence that the circle of knowledge about her fate extended beyond just Stavros and Mercer. Beaumont identified several other wealthy collectors who, like himself, had invested in the forgery operation with full knowledge of its criminal nature. As the investigation expanded, it revealed connections to legitimate art world institutions that had been unwittingly drawn into the scheme. Several museum curators had authenticated forged pieces, their expertise and reputations exploited to lend credibility to the operation. In most cases, these experts had been deceived by the quality of the forgeries and the seemingly solid provenance documentation. However, not all professionals involved had been innocent dupes. Dr. Elliot Richardson, a prominent Byzantine art scholar at a prestigious New York university, was arrested after evidence emerged that he had accepted substantial payments from Mercer in exchange for authenticating forged icons. His academic reputation had been instrumental in establishing the credibility of several major forgeries now in museum collections. During his interrogation, Richardson revealed another disturbing dimension of the case. Stavros wasn't just interested in making money, he explained. He enjoyed the intellectual game of fooling experts and institutions. He once told me at a private dinner that nothing gave him more satisfaction than seeing a forgery he had commissioned hanging in a major museum with scholars studying it as if it were a genuine historical artifact. This psychological insight helped investigators understand why Stavros had kept Sister Evelyn's samples and research notes rather than destroying them. It wasn't just practical insurance, it was a trophy from his victory over someone who had nearly exposed him. The case took yet another turn when digital forensics experts analyzing Mercer's communications discovered encrypted exchanges with a contact identified only as Prometheus. After breaking the encryption, they found detailed discussions about moving artifacts through diplomatic channels, a method that would bypass normal customs inspections. This lead brought the investigation to Wesley Chamberlain, a career State Department official who had served in embassies across the Mediterranean region. Chamberlain had recently retired to a surprisingly luxurious lifestyle that included a villa in Tuscany and a yacht moored in Monaco, assets far beyond what his government salary could have provided. Surveillance of Chamberlain and analysis of his financial records revealed that he had been on Stavros's payroll for years, using diplomatic pouches and shipments to transport both forged and stolen artifacts internationally without customs inspection. When confronted with the evidence against him, Chamberlain agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. His testimony exposed a systematic corruption of diplomatic channels that had facilitated not just art smuggling, but other forms of contraband as well. Stavros had connections throughout the diplomatic community in Athens, Chamberlain revealed. At least 3 other countries' embassies were involved in similar arrangements. It was an open secret in certain circles. This information led to a coordinated international operation involving law enforcement agencies from multiple countries. In a series of simultaneous raids in June 2004, authorities arrested 15 individuals connected to the diplomatic smuggling network, including embassy staff from 4 countries and customs officials who had been bribed to look the other way. Meanwhile, the forensic investigation of the artifacts themselves continued to yield crucial evidence. Dr. Miranda Chen, Sister Evelyn's former colleague, who had mentioned her innovative testing methods, was brought in to analyze the samples recovered from Stavros's hidden laboratory. These are definitely the samples Evelyn collected, Dr. Chen confirmed after examination, and her suspicions were correct. The icons contain synthetic compounds that weren't available before the 1970s, despite purportedly dating from the 12th century. The forgers were brilliant in many ways, but they couldn't overcome basic chemistry. Further analysis revealed that the forgery techniques had evolved over time, becoming increasingly sophisticated as the operation expanded. The earliest forgeries could now be identified relatively easily, but the later works, including those Sister Evelyn had been examining, represented a quantum leap in quality. They were learning and adapting, Dr. Chen explained. Each generation of forgeries incorporated lessons from previous detection methods. Without Evelyn's innovative approach, these later pieces might have remained undetected for decades. This evolution suggested a level of organization and quality control more commonly associated with legitimate businesses than criminal enterprises. The operation had not been merely opportunistic, it had been systematically developed with long-term planning and continuous improvement. As prosecutors prepared cases against the expanding circle of conspirators, they faced a challenge in explaining the full scope of the crime to potential juries. This wasn't simply about fraud or smuggling. It was about the deliberate corruption of history and cultural heritage for profit. These forgeries don't just defraud collectors. explained Dr. Sophia Nikolaidis, a Byzantine art expert assisting the investigation. They contaminate our understanding of history. Scholars have already published analyses of some of these forgeries, treating them as genuine artifacts that provide insights into historical techniques and religious practices. Those academic papers then influence other research, spreading the corruption of knowledge like a virus through the scholarly community. This perspective helped frame the prosecution's approach. Beyond the charges directly related to Sister Evelyn's murder, the defendants would face counts related to cultural heritage crimes, relatively new legal territory that reflected the growing recognition of the importance of protecting authentic historical artifacts and knowledge. By September 2004, the investigation had identified over 100 individuals with varying levels of involvement in the criminal network. These ranged from the central conspirators like Stavros and Mercer to peripheral figures who had provided specific services: forgers, smugglers, corrupt officials, authenticators, and financial facilitators who had helped launder the proceeds. Prosecutions proceeded in multiple jurisdictions, with the U.S. Department of Justice coordinating with authorities in Greece, Italy, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and several other countries where aspects of the crime had occurred. The cases represented one of the most complex international art crime prosecutions in history, requiring unprecedented cooperation across borders. Harrison Beaumont and several other wealthy collectors ultimately faced charges of conspiracy, receiving stolen property, and tax fraud. Most negotiated plea agreements, agreeing to surrender their collections and provide testimony against others in exchange for reduced sentences. Wesley Chamberlain's cooperation led to the identification of diplomatic staff from multiple embassies who had facilitated the smuggling operation, resulting in a series of international diplomatic scandals. The monk who had first broken the silence at the monastery, Brother Elias, provided crucial testimony in the ecclesiastical investigation of Father Gregorios and other complicit clergy. The Orthodox Church ultimately removed several church officials from their positions and implemented new protocols for the authentication and protection of religious artifacts in monasteries throughout Greece. As the criminal cases progressed through various courts, art experts faced the monumental task of distinguishing authentic artifacts from forgeries in collections worldwide. The Pierce Foundation established a specialized laboratory dedicated to implementing Sister Evelyn's testing methods on a broader scale, providing museums and collectors with a reliable means of verification. For Agent Harlow, who had followed the case from a mysterious discovery on a Florida beach to a global criminal enterprise, the investigation represented both a professional triumph and a sobering revelation about the vulnerability of cultural heritage. The smuggling network had operated for years at the intersection of wealth, expertise, and corruption, exploiting gaps in international law enforcement and diplomatic immunity. In her final report on the case, Harlow noted, "What began as an investigation into the disappearance of a single American citizen evolved into the dismantling of a criminal enterprise that had systematically corrupted our understanding of history for profit." Sister Evelyn Parish's dedication to authenticity and truth ultimately exposed not just a murder, but a far-reaching conspiracy to subvert cultural heritage itself. The wooden box containing Sister Evelyn's habit, the physical evidence that had launched the investigation, was eventually transferred to the Sisters of Divine Preservation at their request. They placed it in a small memorial established in her honor, alongside photographs of her at work and samples of the authentic restoration projects she had completed during her career. As 2004 drew to a close, the last major figures in the smuggling network were brought to justice. The case had fundamentally changed how museums and collectors approached the authentication of religious artifacts, particularly Byzantine icons. Sister Evelyn's innovative testing methods, now widely implemented, had created a lasting legacy of protection for cultural heritage. Yet even as the prosecutions concluded, investigators recognized that they had exposed just one network among many. The market for both forged and illegally obtained antiquities continued to thrive, fueled by wealthy collectors willing to acquire pieces regardless of their provenance. The struggle to protect cultural heritage from those who would exploit it for profit remained an ongoing challenge for law enforcement agencies worldwide. The case of Sister Evelyn Parish had demonstrated both the vulnerability of historical artifacts to sophisticated criminal enterprises and the power of expertise and integrity to protect them. Her life had been taken because she refused to compromise the truth. But in death, she had achieved a victory for authenticity that would far outlast the criminal network that had sought to silence her. On a crisp February morning in 2005, the federal courthouse in Tampa buzzed with activity. 16 months after the discovery of Sister Evelyn's habit on a Florida beach, the American phase of the sprawling investigation had culminated in a landmark trial. The prosecution of Vaughn Mercer, despite his cooperation agreement, had become the centerpiece of the Department of Justice's case against the U.S. branch of the smuggling operation. The courtroom was filled to capacity with journalists, legal observers, and representatives from museums and cultural institutions worldwide. The case had drawn unprecedented attention, not only for its connection to Sister Evelyn's murder, but for its implications for the global art market and cultural heritage protection. "Your Honor, the United States calls Special Agent Brooke Harlow to the stand," announced lead prosecutor Danielle Morrison. Harlow had returned from Greece 2 weeks earlier, having testified at Stavros's appeal hearing in Athens. The Greek courts had upheld his murder conviction and life sentence, definitively closing that chapter of the case. As Harlow took the stand, she surveyed the courtroom. In the front row sat Tanner Parrish, Sister Evelyn's brother, who had attended every day of the proceedings. Behind him were several members of the Sisters of Divine Preservation, their presence a silent testament to their fallen colleague. On the defense side, Mercer sat alongside his attorneys, his once confident demeanor now subdued after months in federal custody. Over the next 4 hours, Harlow methodically laid out the investigation's progression, from the mysterious appearance of Sister Evelyn's habit to the unraveling of an international criminal network. Her testimony connected evidence gathered across multiple continents, jurisdictions, and years, weaving together a narrative of greed, deception, and ultimately murder. The box found by Ray Whitman wasn't just evidence of a crime, Harlow explained. It was the thread that, when pulled, unraveled an entire tapestry of criminal enterprise spanning decades and continents. While Mercer had already pleaded guilty to numerous charges, including conspiracy and being an accessory after the fact to murder, this trial represented something larger, a public accounting of how cultural heritage had been systematically exploited and corrupted for profit. The proceedings were designed not just to determine sentencing, but to create a comprehensive record of the case for both legal and historical purposes. During a recess, Agent Harlow spoke briefly with Dr. Miranda Chen, who had been called as an expert witness to explain Sister Evelyn's authentication techniques. "The impact of this case goes far beyond criminal prosecution," Chen observed. "Museums worldwide are re-examining their acquisition policies, and collectors are suddenly very concerned about provenance. There's a fundamental shift happening in how we approach the authenticity of historical artifacts." Indeed, the ripple effects of the investigation had already transformed practices throughout the art world. Major museums had established new authentication protocols specifically designed to detect the sophisticated forgeries created by Stavros's operation. Several institutions had publicly acknowledged that pieces in their collections were likely forgeries and had removed them from display pending further analysis. The trial also brought to light new details about how the smuggling operation had functioned. Beck Donovan, testifying as part of his own cooperation agreement, provided a comprehensive account of the transportation methods used to move both forged and stolen artifacts internationally. "We developed a multi-layered system," Donovan explained from the witness stand. "The most valuable authentic pieces, typically those stolen from museums or archaeological sites, were transported in diplomatic pouches through Chamberlain's network. Forgeries and less valuable items moved through commercial shipping channels, disguised as religious supplies or art reproductions for the tourist market." Donovan's testimony revealed that the Poseidon's Trident had made at least 27 voyages, carrying illicit cargo between 1999 and 2003. Each shipment had contained a mixture of forged Byzantine icons and genuine antiquities stolen from various locations throughout the Mediterranean region. The operation had been compartmentalized, with different teams handling creation, aging, documentation, transportation, and sales, many members knowing only their specific role in the larger scheme. The most dramatic testimony came from a former forger who had worked for Stavros in Athens. Dimitri Kazan, a talented artist who had studied traditional Byzantine painting techniques, had been granted immunity in exchange for his cooperation. His detailed explanation of how the forgeries were created provided a rare glimpse into the technical aspects of art fraud. We worked in a converted warehouse outside Athens, with security like a military installation, Kazan testified. Each icon went through at least 7 distinct processes: creation of the wooden panel using period-appropriate methods, application of traditional gesso grounds, painting using pigments matched to historical examples, artificial aging through chemical and physical processes, strategic damage and repair to suggest centuries of existence, and finally, creation of false documentation. Kazan revealed that Stavros had recruited artists from legitimate conservation programs, exploiting their expertise and often their financial vulnerability. He approached me when I was a struggling restoration student, Kazan explained. The money was extraordinary, $20,000 for a single icon that might take 2 weeks to complete. Many of us justified it by telling ourselves these were reproductions rather than forgeries, but we all knew they would be sold as authentic. The forger's testimony was accompanied by video demonstrations of the techniques used, leaving many in the courtroom astounded by the sophistication and attention to detail involved. Even experienced curators admitted they would have difficulty detecting such forgeries without advanced scientific testing. As the trial progressed, the prosecution introduced evidence from the financial investigation, which had tracked over $65 million flowing through the network, a figure substantially higher than earlier estimates. Financial analyst Maya Desai presented intricate diagrams showing how the money had moved through shell companies, offshore accounts, and eventually into legitimate investments, including real estate, stocks, and even charitable foundations that enhanced the conspirators' social standing and provided tax benefits. The financial structure was designed not just to hide the criminal proceeds, but to launder them both literally and figuratively, converting tainted money from art fraud into respectable wealth and social capital, Desai explained. This aspect of the case had led to a series of parallel civil forfeiture actions, with federal authorities seizing assets purchased with proceeds from the criminal enterprise. Mercer's gallery, multiple properties, investment accounts, and even a vineyard in Sonoma had been confiscated. Similar actions against other conspirators had recovered millions in assets that would eventually be directed toward restitution for victims and funding for cultural heritage protection programs. In the 3rd week of the trial, the prosecution introduced perhaps the most powerful evidence: Sister Evelyn's own voice. Her journal, recovered from Stavros's safe, provided a day-by-day account of her work at the monastery and her growing suspicions about the artifacts she was examining. "There's something fundamentally wrong with these pieces," she had written 10 days before her disappearance. "The iconographic elements are perfect, too perfect in fact. They follow known examples slavishly, rather than showing the individual variations one would expect from different artists. And the aging patterns show subtle inconsistencies with the wood substrate. I'm collecting samples for testing, though I must do so discreetly. I sense I'm being watched." Her final entry, written the morning of her disappearance, was particularly poignant. Confronted Father G about my concerns this morning, his reaction was oddly dismissive for someone supposedly dedicated to preservation of sacred artifacts. Mentioned my concerns might necessitate contacting international authorities. Within an hour, received message that Stavros wishes to speak with me privately at his villa this evening. Suspicious timing. Will bring my satellite phone and alert Tanner to expect my call afterward. That call never came. Instead, as the court had heard, Sister Evelyn was murdered that evening. Her body weighted and dropped into the Mediterranean from a private boat owned by one of Stavros's associates. As the prosecution prepared to rest its case, they called one final witness, Harrison Beaumont, the billionaire collector, whose cooperation had helped expose the network of wealthy buyers who had fueled the market for both forged and stolen artifacts. Beaumont's testimony offered an unvarnished look at the psychology of high-end collectors who acquired artifacts through questionable channels. "There's a certain cachet to possessing something no one else can have," he admitted. The exclusivity of owning pieces not available on the legitimate market appealed to a particular competitive instinct. Mercer and Stavros understood this psychology perfectly and exploited it. He described private showings for ultra-wealthy collectors where both forged and stolen pieces were displayed together, creating a false impression that all were genuine historical artifacts unavailable through legitimate channels. Buyers were made to feel they were joining an exclusive club of connoisseurs with access to treasures beyond the reach of conventional museums and collectors. We convinced ourselves we were preserving these pieces by bringing them into private collections, Beaumont explained. But in reality, we were creating the market that incentivized both forgery and theft from archaeological sites and museums. After 3 weeks of testimony, the prosecution rested its case. The defense, recognizing the overwhelming evidence against their client, focused primarily on mitigating factors for sentencing: Mercer's cooperation, his lesser role compared to Stavros, and his expressions of remorse. On March 15, 2005, Judge Eleanor Simmons delivered her verdict and sentence. Mercer received 25 years in federal prison for his role in the conspiracy, money laundering, smuggling, and being an accessory after the fact to Sister Evelyn's murder. The sentence reflected both the severity of the crimes and consideration for his substantial cooperation with authorities. Mr. Mercer, your crimes transcend ordinary fraud or smuggling, Judge Simmons stated during sentencing. You participated in a conspiracy that not only took a human life, but attempted to corrupt our very understanding of history and cultural heritage. The forgeries you helped create and sell didn't just defraud individual collectors. They contaminated the historical record and scholarly knowledge upon which our understanding of the past depends. The judge also ordered Mercer to pay $18 million in restitution to museums, collectors, and cultural institutions that had unwittingly purchased forgeries through his gallery. Additional funds from seized assets would be directed toward establishing a foundation dedicated to developing and implementing advanced authentication techniques for cultural artifacts. As the Tampa trial concluded, parallel proceedings continued in multiple jurisdictions. In Athens, prosecutors were building cases against the network of forgers who had created the fake artifacts. In Switzerland, authorities had indicted several bankers who had facilitated the movement of criminal proceeds through the financial system. In London, the trial of a prominent auction house expert who had authenticated several forgeries for a percentage of the sales price was underway. The case had also prompted legislative changes in multiple countries. The U.S. Congress was considering the Cultural Heritage Protection Act, which would strengthen penalties for art fraud and trafficking in stolen antiquities. The European Union had established a task force specifically focused on cultural heritage crimes, with enhanced cooperation agreements among member states. For the art world, the case had forced a painful reckoning. Major museums worldwide were re-examining recent acquisitions, particularly those with limited provenance documentation. The market for Byzantine religious artifacts had virtually collapsed as collectors became wary of forgeries, and prices for pieces with impeccable provenance documentation had skyrocketed as they became the only trustworthy investments. On a personal level, the case had transformed the lives of many involved. Ray Whitman, the fisherman who had discovered Sister Evelyn's habit, had used his reward money to establish a small marine conservation foundation. Detective Markos Petridis had been promoted to lead a new cultural crimes unit within the Greek police. Brother Elias, whose testimony had been crucial in breaking the monastery's wall of silence, had transferred to a different monastery where he was studying art conservation, inspired by Sister Evelyn's dedication to authenticity. For Agent Brooke Harlow, the conclusion of the Tampa trial marked the end of nearly 2 years, dedicated almost exclusively to the case. As she packed her files for return to Washington, she reflected on the investigation's journey, from a mysterious discovery on a beach to an international conspiracy that had fundamentally changed how cultural heritage crimes were understood and prosecuted. 1 month after Mercer's sentencing, a small ceremony was held at the Sisters of Divine Preservation headquarters in Cambridge, Massachusetts. There, the Pierce Foundation for Religious Conservation officially launched the Sister Evelyn Parish Center for Authentication and Conservation Ethics. The center would train future conservators in both the technical aspects of authentication and the ethical dimensions of cultural heritage preservation. At the center's dedication, Tanner Parish spoke about his sister's legacy. Evelyn understood that authentic artifacts are not merely objects of beauty or historical curiosity, he said. They are vessels of truth that connect us to our shared human past. By protecting their authenticity, she was protecting something fundamental about how we understand ourselves and our history. The center's first initiative was to develop a comprehensive database of known forgeries from the Stavros Mercer operation, creating a reference that would help identify other potential forgeries in collections worldwide. They also implemented Sister Evelyn's advanced testing protocols as standard procedure for authentication of religious artifacts, ensuring that her methods would continue to protect cultural heritage long after her death. In Greece, a memorial plaque was installed at the monastery of Agios Nikolaos, acknowledging both Sister Evelyn's work and the monastery's commitment to authentic preservation going forward. The monastery, under new leadership, had established strict protocols for authentication and documentation of its genuine historical artifacts. By late 2005, most of the major figures in the criminal network had been brought to justice. Nikolaos Stavros remained in prison in Greece, his appeals exhausted. Vaughan Mercer was serving his sentence at a federal correctional institution in Pennsylvania. Beck Donovan, having provided valuable cooperation, was serving a reduced sentence of 12 years. Wesley Chamberlain, the State Department official who had facilitated smuggling through diplomatic channels, received 20 years for his extensive corruption and breach of public trust. The most significant legacy of the case, however, was institutional rather than individual. Law enforcement agencies worldwide had developed new protocols for investigating cultural heritage crimes, recognizing them not merely as property offenses, but as attacks on historical knowledge itself. Museums had implemented more rigorous authentication procedures, and collectors had become far more cautious about provenance documentation. In her final report on the case, submitted to FBI headquarters in December 2005, Agent Harlow summarized its significance. The Stavros-Mercer network represented a new paradigm in cultural heritage crime, one that combined sophisticated forgery, theft of genuine artifacts, corruption of verification systems, and exploitation of legitimate institutions. Their operation targeted not just financial gain, but the systematic corruption of historical knowledge for profit. The methods developed during this investigation will serve as a template for addressing similar threats to cultural heritage in the future. The wooden box that had washed up on a Florida beach, the simple object that had launched the entire investigation, was eventually placed in a permanent display at the Sister Evelyn Parish Center. Next to it, a photograph showed Sister Evelyn at work, carefully examining an icon with the focused attention and integrity that had ultimately cost her her life, but had preserved the authenticity of cultural heritage for generations to come. As visitors to the center viewed this display, they were reminded that the protection of cultural artifacts is not merely about preserving objects, but about safeguarding truth itself, a principle for which Sister Evelyn Parish had made the ultimate sacrifice, and for which justice had finally been served across oceans and continents.